Nope, sorry about that. I think it's going to work. It looks like it's working. Okay. All right. It says it's done. And yes, it is recording. All right. Thank you. Good luck. Yep. Bye.
How you doing, Chief? Kelly?
Hey, I'm well, Kevin. Yourself?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Good.
I appreciate you doing this today.
Oh, of course. Of course. And I appreciate being part of the process for real.
I try to throw, a little blockage, but they still went for you anyway. So
despite your recommendation otherwise, huh?
actually, you were the first thought out of my mouth when they asked about this. So I appreciate you.
Gentlemen, we are working on a stream right now. Okay.
Yep.
Just be aware.
Yep.
Just a couple of coworkers talking back and forth, or former coworkers.
There you go. It's all good.
2 minutes.
Commissioner Ince, you may want to adjust your camera again.
Yeah, I know. I was leaning over, pushing buttons on the on my thing here, getting everything set up.
Okay.
Kelly and Kevin, you may want to mute your microphones. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I will start the pre-screen. Okay.
Sounds good.
When you need affordable healthcare for all ages and stages, lean on Molina Healthcare. Molina
All right, welcome back, everybody. I see that our participant list is growing, so I'm hopeful that everybody was able to get back in. We will reconvene the January 15th special meeting of the Fire Commissioners for the purpose of conducting our second Fire Chief interview of the day here. I will now turn it over to Chief Busey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if we can go ahead and invite in our next interviewee. I'm assuming he's making his way in from the gallery, huh?
It's a long walk up to the podium here.
You're right.
Bear with me. There we go.
There we go. Okay. Well, welcome in to the interviewee number 2, Assistant Chief Todd Meyer. Welcome, Todd. Thank you. My name is Kelly Busey. As you know, I'm the police chief for the city of Gig Harbor, and my role today is that of moderator. I have nothing to do with the selection process. With me here today as panelists on the interview are the 5 commissioners with whom you're familiar, Chair Wilsey, Commissioners Sudich, NC, Nelson, and Irvina, as well as President of the Labor Union, Union President Jake Flick. Today you will have 90 minutes to answer 18 questions. Before and after that, we will have a 3-minute introduction and a close. While your response to the questions aren't timed individually, we may not ask all 18 questions if you reach the end of that 90 minutes before we finish. You understand that? Okay.
Yes.
You may ask that I repeat any of the questions that are asked to you, and I'll try to break them up to help you answer them if they're multi-part questions. The fire commissioners and panelists will be permitted to ask follow-up questions. They'll do that by simply signaling by raising their hand. And your 90-minute time will start approximately now, and we'll give you 3 minutes to introduce and tell us a little bit about yourself. So, Chief Meyer.
Well, good morning. Thank you for having me here. It is an honor and a privilege to be here sitting in front of not only the panelists, but also our members of our fire department and on our community here on Zoom. feel very fortunate. And one of the things throughout this process and discussing it with my wife is I've been very blessed for the opportunity and the career that I've had here at Gig Harbor Fire. So I'm very fortunate. I was born and raised in Tacoma and Gig Harbor. Spent most of my years here in Gig Harbor. Grew up through the Peninsula School District and graduated from Gig Harbor High School in 1988. Went off to college. Started my college career down playing a little bit of college football at Eastern Oregon State. And then when I figured out I wasn't very good at football, I transferred to Central Washington and finished my development and my 4-year degree in economics at Central Washington University. When I came home and got done with school, I was thinking about going into business. I had an opportunity to get a job and work for the company Les Schwab. Did that a year, and while I was doing that, I was reintroduced to one of my childhood friends, Terry Teeple, and he was very involved in the fire department. And so one of the things is he got me excited about volunteering. So I started doing that. Once I volunteered, I was hooked, and I knew I wanted to do it for a career. And so then I went after it, set a goal to get hired, put myself through the fire academy at Bates Technical College in 1995, became a resident, really developed the situation, if you will. I had support of my family and my fiance at the time, who is now my wife, and really got after it, and went around and did all the testing. Could have got hired in Ellensburg, Pasco, or Port Angeles, just testing all around. But Gig Harbor called first, and that's been my home ever since. Since I've been at Gig Harbor, I've had some great opportunities to not only develop myself, but develop other people. I've rose up through the ranks from lieutenant to battalion chief, spent over 10 years as a battalion chief, and the last just over 2 years as an assistant chief at the executive level in charge of operations. Other things I've done over my career is I've been involved in business on the private side. I've also taught at different academies. I had a very great opportunity to teach early in my career at Bates Technical College in the fire service program, and had a lot of great members over the years that have helped me along to get me to where I am at now, and to be our next fire chief. So thank you very much for that question. I appreciate that.
Certainly. Any follow-up from the introduction from our panelists? Okay, if not, we'll move directly into our structured questions. And the first question here, Chief, comes from our commissioners. It's 3 parts. I'll ask it I'll give you the first 2 parts first to make it easier for you. So what would you expect from the board to help you be successful in this position? And what is your ideal working relationship? What would that be like with the board?
Well, one of the things, the first thing that comes to my mind is a partnership between the board and the fire chief. One of the things I know that for me is coming new into this position and not having done this before as a fire chief, one of the ones I would look for them for guidance and support, and also to have that good working relationship. And for me, when we talk about that partnership or relationship, it goes back to communication and communicating often. One of the things is that I think for us to be successful and take us to the next step as Gig Harbor Fire, we need to be all on the same page. We need to have that partnership and develop that roadmap, whether it's the fire chief, the board, and labor and our members in the community. We all need to be on that same roadmap. And so one of the things for me is communicating early, communicating often, getting their perspective and guidance as far as what their lead's intent at the policy level is. And then I also would look at how to do that is continue our work and updating our strategic plan. That's our roadmap. And sometimes when I is developing that roadmap, and I think that a strategic plan and updating that would be a tool to use to help guide us and keep us on track, if you will, and keep us in the right direction. And Chief Busey, there was a third part.
Correct. What process would you use to present a new item or issue to the board? What process?
Well, one of the things that we have, our board is set up and they have different, like I said, communicate early and often, and lack of better words, have little or to no surprises, try to eliminate surprises. But one of the things is I would actively engage in, they have committees, they have capital facilities committees, they have labor management committees. So they each have different subsets or different subject matters, if you will, that I would engage in those committees on those different subjects. So I think that's a tool that we already have and it's well established. So I would just engage in that and hopefully promote that and continue with that effort.
Okay, the next question comes from our labor group. Do you believe that succession planning and professional mentorship have a place in the fire service? What have you done to encourage succession planning and mentorship?
Great question. Thank you. I think succession planning and mentorship is the foundation of what we do concerning our personnel. Throughout my career, like I said earlier in my introduction, I've been involved in Bates Technical College, been involved in instruction throughout my entire career. And the success isn't about me. The success is about the people that come behind us, the people that are going out and delivering the product or the customer service on the street. So that's where the emphasis is. So things that I've done in the past, early on, like I said, I've been involved in Bates Technical College. I was the first Gig Harbor firefighter hired at Bates Technical College in the fire service concerning their two-year or their academy program. So that's for me a mark. And there have been multiple people that have come after me. And that is a great thing for me to see those, to this day, our people succeeding and helping out and developing our people at those academies. The other thing too for me is I spent some time as a lieutenant in the training division. And it was one of my KSAs or knowledge, skills, and abilities that I'm very passionate about is developing our people. And I spent that time in the training division developing programs, developing props, down there getting dirty, leading people, also to the teaching and instructing, and then also preparing that next generation, which is coming to fruition now. When I see some of the guys and gals that have been residents for us or that are now doing the teaching and now taking these programs, that for me is where it makes me smile, it makes me excited. It's not about me, it's about them. And for me, that succession planning not only happens at the firefighter level, but it also happens at the support staff level also too, and it helps in our officers and even our executive management. So give you a case in point. One of the things that I have recently done, and we even did it before the recession, is developed what we call a BC Academy, where we get our new people that come in off the new list that tested, and we send them through a BC Academy. We enlarged that when after the recession, we brought this back this last year, where we have the BC Academy and also the LT Academy. Also too, with this year, we are going to expand some of those concepts to the executive chief level concerning some of our response things that we maybe, lack of better words, need to shore up concerning ICS and some of our responses. So those are some of the things that I've done throughout the years. But mentorship also happens at a personal level, whether it's one-on-one with current employees, but it's also too the people that are coming in the fire district or looking to get into a career in the fire service. So the kids in high school have met with them over coffee. Then there also is the component of supporting the people that are around me, my further assistant chiefs, and also the chief of the the fire department. Providing that mentorship, providing that peer support, I think is key. And that's a huge foundation for me moving forward as our next fire chief.
Okay, thank you. Question 3 comes from a community member. As fire chief, how would you propose that the department address and close the gap on equity and diversity in the hiring process at this department?
Great question. Thank you. So a couple things, talk about a couple things that we have done here in our fire district already. One of the things is we made a change here recently to reduce the barriers to incoming people. It used to be where we required a whole bunch of be a resident, be a volunteer, do different things as far as have a whole bunch of certifications, EMT. And one of the things that we wanted to do is we wanted to reduce the barriers to reduce the barriers to how people come into our organization. And one of the things is that we've done is we reduced our EMT certification. And what we've noticed is it's just great. We brought in a wider net of people, which includes minorities and female employees that may have had a barrier before, that maybe just haven't had the opportunity before. Some of our old things where we required an EMT or required to have you have some type of firefighter service. So greatly excited about the strides that we've done already. Also too, for me is how do we provide, I was in a webinar conference this last fall put on by the Pierce County Tacoma Economic Development Board. And it was a fascinating webinar seminar that I attended. And one of the things that they talked about are how to reduce or how to promote diversity, how to reduce racism in the workplace or in business, was have multiple pathways for jobs. And it was a great concept, and it goes right into us reducing the barriers that we've already taken place, but I think we can do more. One of the also other things that has just recently happened is we just went through a process and for new hires, and we're actually doing chiefs interviews next week. And one of the things early on, because of the COVID situation, we had some of our interviews over Zoom, just like we are here today. But one of the benefits out of that, coming from our members and the people that were involved in that process, one of the side effects, but it was a benefit or a bonus, if you will, is we were able to Zoom and communicate with people that were in New York, Los Angeles, out of state, Eastern Washington. And that just reduced the barriers and opened, lack of better words, our borders to allow more people to come in. And one of the things that we talked about was that would reduce the burden of the economic factor trying to get hired, rather than flying out. How many times do we need to fly out to Gig Harbor? Can we reduce that? So looking at those ways for not only social and economical ways to get people on the fire service. Also for me, be very clear. For me, when we're hired here, everybody has equal value in this organization. We may have different responsibilities, but regardless of where you come from or who you are, everybody has equal value and can bring different things to the table to make a stronger fire department. And I strongly, wholeheartedly look forward to continuing those efforts as our next fire chief.
Okay. Question 4, Chief, comes from our commissioners. It's 3 parts. I'll ask you the first 2 parts initially. What experience have you had working with volunteer firefighters? And what differences do you see between career and volunteer firefighters?
That's a great question. Thank you. So like I said in my introduction, I came up through the volunteer ranks. And throughout my whole career, whether it's been working at Gig Harbor Fire, all different levels throughout my career, from being a resident firefighter to being a firefighter, all the way up to even just recently here till we stopped drilling because of COVID. I have been involved in the volunteer program. Training, supporting, supervising, different things concerning that, being involved and being present when they are with our community in our organization. So I have a vast different background. It goes back to some of the things that working at different academies, and also to working at Bates Technical College, and when I was in the training division, just a huge amount of pride, huge amount of support for the volunteers. And I've demonstrated that throughout my whole career. And I'll give you a point with, you talk about the difference between volunteers and career firefighters. We each have sometimes different skill sets, and sometimes different skill sets because of what we are asked to be done. When I was involved with Crunch Time for 10 years as the co-founder of Crunch Time, one of the things that I was very pleased with at Crunch Time was that we had students from all walk of life, from all different parts of the country, and our training and our compassion didn't regardless of where they came from. The compassion and the training and the involvement it didn't matter where they were from, whether they were a volunteer or career. And that was a theme that we had at Crunch Time. And I was very proud of that theme. And so I think when you talk about differences, their differences come down to skill set. Okay. And then we have to, as best we can, train them to the appropriate skill set. And I have a lot of experience doing that, whether that's at the Washington State Fire Academy, here at Gig Harbor, Crunch Time, and also my experience out in incident management teams in wildland, work with volunteers all the time. And they're a great piece of our response here in the state of Washington. So it was a third part, Chief. He's muted.
Oh, sorry, I thought I clicked it. What programs would you implement to maximize volunteer involvement, response, and sustainability? What programs?
Programs. One of the things for me is, yes, we do have a need for some of our rural areas that we may not staff right away with career folks. We have to engage our community, and we have to engage our community, and we have to promote and support bringing people in. So one of the things for me, I would like to continue to do, I know Chief Johnson talked about it the other night, and him and I have had many conversations about it. I'd like to engage a CERT program here in Gig Harbor Fire to help have our community members help our other community members. Then I also think there's an opportunity to have, whether it's a resident program, a volunteer program, or a student intern program, something in some of our more rural areas. And I look at what we have here in Greater Puget Sound with some of the schools that we have, where we can tap some of that energy and some of those students that have maybe already said, hey, I want to be in the fire service. Hey, I want to be a paramedic. Hey, I want to be this. And can we engage them? Can we develop a program where we have, and we may change the words, we may change what the title is, but the theme is, we have to pay attention to what's happening out on Fox Island. And we may not staff that right away. We're going to have to study that, but we have to have some type of volunteer force. So for me, it's a two-pronged approach. We have a volunteer from our community members, from as far as like a CERT program, that is already being developed already, and I support that. And then also too, we need to look at our Bates technical programs and some of our partnership in the area to maximize and leverage some of those programs, because I think it's nothing better to have a high quality trained younger force that is in our community and can provide service to some of our rural areas. And the nice thing about it for us is that we bring them on, we test them out, and then there's a potential that we hire them. And we have had success here at Gig Harbor Fire doing that over the years. I'm one of them from over 20 years ago. So can we bring some of that program back somehow? It maybe is not as grand. When I came on board, we had over 100 volunteers. So for me, do we have a smaller workforce, if you will, of volunteers that we can make them highly trained and support some of our more rural areas that we may not staff in the next 2 years? So thank you.
Okay, question 5, Chief, comes from our labor group. How should a fire chief communicate with the community at large, as well as the local elected officials?
Chief, can you say the last part? Can you repeat the question, sir?
Absolutely. How should a fire chief communicate with the community at large, as well as local elected officials?
To answer that two-part question, I think one word that comes to my mind is it has to be constant. It has to be a constant effort. And community at large, I think it needs to be not only as the fire chief, it needs to be a mindset across our whole organization that we need to be out in our community. But for me specifically as the fire chief, how do we engage the public? I think it needs to happen constantly. And the term that I'll use is, you'll hear me say, being present in the community, being present in the fire station. It's not just when we want something, it's constant, regardless of if we're asking for something. We should be there as a partnership in our community. I mean, there's even pictures out there, and I'll just give you, there's pictures out there of me as a battalion chief in the Sparky outfit riding a camel at the Scarecrow Festival. So it's that's kind of the stuff that that may happen, and I'm not afraid to do. But I believe being involved in the community. I'm currently involved in Rotary. I'm supporting different functions concerning Rotary. And also too, I think it's more on the ad hoc level. It's being at the Gig Festival. It's being out on the 4th of July. It's being out and being in our community constantly. Not in just a formal concept at meetings, but also in the community. This is probably, to be honest with you guys and folks, this is probably my strong point. This is my community. Whether it's out on Fox Island, whether it's in Prettier, Gig Harbor, I have a strong relationship with our partnerships here with law enforcement, with our partnerships with our different utility companies and the school district. And so this is, for me, one of my strong points, and I'll just be honest with you. And it's not only those different community groups, it's also the individual persons, whether it's at the Fred Meyer or it's whether someone at the Fox Island boat ramp, stopping and talking to people and being engaged and being present. So for me, it's being constant. How to be with local officials. So one of the things is, I think it's being, again, being present at meetings, whether it's the city council meetings, whether it's our being involved with elected officials. One of the great things that I've had experience doing is I participated down at the legislature level at the testifying process. I was just actually on the phone this last week with the Washington State Fire Chiefs executive director about getting involved in that level concerning my position, even as an assistant chief at that state fire chief's level. So had good conversations about potentially of doing that. But the local officials, yeah, I think continuing with that effort and some of my experience that I've done out within incident management teams and my experience with the emergency management, dealing with local officials and being in different communities throughout the Northwest. Sometimes I've been put into situations where I've had to go in and, lack of better words, defuse some things or be a liaison to some things. And so they have asked me to go into these different communities and do some of those things, dealing with elected officials, whether they're fire commissioners, whether they're city council persons, or even the mayor of different things. So developing those relationships, I think, is key. And I think it's a constant effort to being present in our community.
Okay, thank you. Question 6 comes from a community member. When you are selected for the role of fire chief, what will your 30, 60, and 90-day plans be?
That's a great question. So right now, Gig Harbor Fire, actually throughout my whole career, has been experiencing change. And how do we lead that change? How do we manage that change? And one of the things I would hope to do in the next 30 days is help provide stability for that change. We are going through our largest hiring. We just hired 19 firefighters this last year and are bringing on more to help with staffing our stations, staffing our apparatus. So for me is to provide that stability for in the first 30 days. When we start looking out for the next 60 to 90 days, one of the things that is on our plate, a couple things that are on our plate, is continuing with the capital facilities plan work, get that completed. And so we can have that in place, because we know that we're going to go out for some type of third funding measure here in the next year or so. And so getting that capital facilities plan in place and continuing that work is something that will probably needs to happen, so we can take the next step as far as with that third funding measure. The next 90 days, again, throughout this whole thing, provide that stability. But the other thing that we're going to have to look at, and I've talked about it earlier, is the roadmap. And one of the things is I want to look and review our strategic plan with the board, with labor, and with the membership as whole, and look at some of the things that we need to continue to do on that strategic plan. Is there some holes that we have? And then we need to update it and prioritize the things that we have left concerning that. But I think for me is, when we look at it, that question overall is provide that stability of where we're going forward. I plan on finishing my career here at Gig Harbor Fire. I have the energy, and I'm excited to be here to take that next step. I'm actually thinking about the next 5 years of where we're going to be at. But that's a great question. Thank you very much for that.
All right, Chief, the next question comes from our commissioners. Please describe your approach to recruitment, retention, and development of staff. What does diversity mean to you, and how does that factor in?
Great, thank you. So when we look at staff, so one of the things is, for me, is I want to provide a healthy place to work at. That's my one of my visions, if you will, is to create a healthy work environment. And one of the things is that how can we have our people be fulfilled, and how can we be provide opportunities for our staff, whether you're the support staff, our mechanics, our line people, or even if our executive level leadership. So how do we recruit people? I think that we continue to reduce, like I talked about earlier, reducing the barriers, look at multiple pathways concerning diversity and reducing those barriers, whether they're social or economic concerns. And also to be out in the public as the fire chief, be that voice, be that person that is out recruiting in our schools, in our organizations for the quality of people. And then also the retention, continue to support the programs that we already have in place, but can we take those to the next step? One of the things is when I talked early on in this process, when I talked with the union about some of their goals and some of their things for the next fire chief, one of the things that came up was succession planning. And so providing roadmaps for our people concerning that retention of our people. We have great people here, and how do we keep them? Also, too, how do we develop them? And if we develop and then they go on and they can be better fulfilled somewhere else, great. But if we can keep them here and retain them and continue their growth, that is huge. So one of the things for me is, how do we create those roadmaps for different people and different projects, create opportunities for them? There's different things like promotional possibilities for different people. We send people to the National Fire Academy. So when we come here, you'll hear, why do people want to come to Gig Harbor? A lot of it has to do with our training. And a lot of it has to do with our medical programs, our EMS programs. And so how do we continue those efforts and how do we retain those people? So when I look at the diversity, how do we reduce those barriers? And one of the things that comes down to me for one way as far as retention is overall having value for people and having respect for each other. One of the things that I think also that we can do is our education piece as far as our development of our people and also awareness of our training concerning diversity and inclusion for all of our people in our organization. And that's something that has been a great benefit with bringing on our current HR personnel. That has been a huge step for our organization. And I would like to see that continue. Some of the conversations that we are having right now and where we want to take some of our training and some of our stuff concerning some of these issues is it's just a starting point. And trying to continue that effort is huge. And I'm supportive and would like to support that moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Question 8 comes from the labor group. Have you been a part of any capital improvement projects? If so, in what capacity?
Good question. So one of the things is, so capital improvement projects, one of the things when I was in the training division as a lieutenant, I was involved in the first phase of our training development campus. Met with the architects, met with the different divisions, went out and visited different places, and not only looked at the design features and also, but helped work with those partnerships concerning our training campus. Also, over the years, have been involved in apparatus specifications when we've gone out to bid on different apparatus, then back to the factories, toured the factories, been through that process. And then also this last year as an assistant chief, been involved with the capital facilities plan as far as the recent upgrades to our stations. And so those are things I've been involved with over the years. The other thing that I've done with involvement over the years is also develop the situations where been exposed to the different fire commissioners meetings and the different fire chiefs meetings at the executive level, if you will, and just being developing that situational awareness and having a better understanding of that side of the business of the house has helped me with these. Now, when I'm sitting at this side of the table, whether as the next fire chief or as the current fire chief, has helped prepare me for the things that are to come. So thank you.
Okay, question 9 comes from a community member. To what extent do you personally use social media, and how do you see such technology as a valuable form of communication to the Gig Harbor community?
Can you repeat that, sir?
Certainly. To what extent do you personally use social media, and how do you see such technology as a valuable form of communication to the Gig Harbor community?
All right, great question. So personally, for me, I am involved in social media. Some people make fun of me because sometimes I mispronounce the words or I say different things concerning different phrases and different stuff. So, but anyway, so one of the things is, yes, I do have a personal Facebook account. Yes, I do have a personal Twitter account. And yes, I do subscribe to LinkedIn, and I do have a LinkedIn account there. So yes, I am on social media. I see the benefits also of social media, and then I also see when you have to show constraint on social media. So one of the things as far as the fire department side, I do believe it's an important tool, and it's an important tool in messaging our, as a fire district, our involvement in the community. One of the things is a battalion chief, and it goes back a few years, even goes back to Nanette Tatum. I was very, how do we promote our message? How do we inform the public, whether a road is closed or where we have a fire down a street, or we're just putting something on there to say, hey, we're doing some training today. Hey, we're doing this today. So I've had demonstrated the use of social media pretty much from its inception. And I have a history of informing our PIOs of whether I text them, send them pictures. But I've always been a proponent of telling our story to the public. And I see social media as being one of those tools. I also see, engagement with our media partners, whether it's TV, whether it's the News Tribune. I had an interview a couple days ago concerning this process with the Tacoma News Tribune. But I think moving forward, social media has a role here with Gig Harbor Fire. I support it. I support looking at different ways to engage it. I have a history of engaging it and sending stuff out and being a promoter of our public educators to get our message out. Just recently here last year, did some videos for some community risk reduction, and great partnered with Tina Curran on that project, just to kind of get the awareness level out concerning wildfire in our community and how do we mitigate that risk. So having those experiences, I think, is great. And I see it as a tool that Gig Harbor Fire will continue to use and continue to promote here in the next few years.
Okay, thank you. As way of a time check, about 50 minutes remaining in the structured question time, and you're about halfway through the question, so you appear to be right on time. The next question, question 10, comes from our commissioners. Please provide any examples of how you have been able to enhance service levels without added expense, or were successful in saving money without diminishing services.
Can you say the second part again, please?
I'll read the whole question.
Thank you.
Please provide any examples of how you've been able to enhance service levels without added expense, or were successful in saving money without diminishing services.
So a couple things, thank you for the question. So a couple things that come to mind here that I've done as an assistant chief. And I think some of these things that you were talking about were not done. I think we're going to continue to look for efficiencies and economies of scale and our effectiveness, because I know one of the main things for me is reducing our response times. But enhancing service levels. So one of the things is just where we're currently at. I'll give you an example. Has made the decision just this last year. We needed to get our tenders on the road more. And we evaluated it as an organization. And because of our reduced volunteer ranks, one of the things is we had made the decision to move our tenders to career stations. And what that would do is improve our tender response to major alarms or to structure fires or different types of fires. And so that was one example of doing that here recently. And it has helped us out and didn't cost us anything. We're still reviewing. This has just not been over a year old. So we're still reviewing that. But as far as looking forward, it has been a good addition to getting those tenders on the road sooner with not only career staff, but also non-response staff, whether it's other lieutenants or firefighters or chief officers that aren't already on medic units or engines. Also, too, something that we've recently done is we've reduced our fleet of reserve medic units. One of the things that we had, we had some reserve medic units that were getting older. And what we made the decision to do is reduce that number of fleet. And it helps us on a couple fronts. As we continue on, we are continuing to purchase medic units and replace them. We got a new one coming in this month, so which is great. So one of the things is we looked at it and says we need to reduce this ambulance fleet because it's costing us money to keep these older apparatus in service. So we looked at simplifying our response package and taking some of these older medic units out of service because we were spending more time, effort in the shop's time keeping them in service. And so what we've done when we reduce the number of reserve apparatus, and then also too, what that does is it allows it to consolidate some of our supplies. So rather than trying to outfit, 7 or 8 ambulances, if you will, or transport units, if we reduce that fleet down, we don't have to buy as many supplies buy as much supplies. And that has reduced some of the monies without reducing what we've been trying to do on the street. It seems to have been getting favorable feedback from the crews as far as keeping us more in frontline apparatus, and also we're not spending money over here with outdated equipment that sometimes when you have older equipment, it gets more expensive to fix. So we reduced our fleet, reduced our supplies, trying to simplify our service and enhance what we're currently doing. The other thing that I've currently done is move some apparatus around. So to put our newest fire engines either in a staff station or in a reserve status. And a couple things that does is that it provides simplicity and consistency for our crews. And also too, it provides putting the newer apparatus on the street with our crews. And one of the things that has done for our crews is provide more consistent equipment and also shorter, not turnout time, but when we move in and move out of apparatus, we're out of service time. And so what we've tried to do over the last couple of years is streamline some of that reserve apparatus so we can provide a better product on the street, not only to the customers, but also to our people. So thank you.
Okay, question 11 comes from our labor group. How familiar are you with the IAFF Wellness Fitness Initiative, and what is your position in regards to adhering to the initiative?
I'm supportive of the initiative. I'm also supportive of our personnel that we are training to be wellness and fitness peer fitness trainers. One of the things, just having a conversation this last week with Assistant Chief John Johnson about how to engage the peer fitness trainers more with our staff, and doing some evaluations, and how do we go about that business. So support that. I also support some of the things is concerning the Redmond Symposium and sending our people. I know in the past we've sent, it's been a joint project with labor, admin, and also I believe in the past we've sent our doctor, and I want to continue to see that. Also, a component of this wellness and fitness initiative is the peer support, and some of the things that we've done with peer support concerning our involvement with Dr. Hart. I'm seeing support that and support what her and the peer support folks are doing concerning that wellness and fitness package. So yes, very supportive of what's going on, and continue to have that partnership with labor and what we do.
Okay, the next question comes from a community member. In our community, county, and state, we have a wildland-urban interface problem. What will you do as fire chief to help prepare our community, our firefighters, and our county for a large-scale wildland-urban interface incident?
So thank you. Very good question. So I look at it as a four-pronged approach. I look at it, first of all, being education, educating our public, educating our members, and even guiding our board, because this is important. This is something that is coming towards us. I talked a little bit about it in our presentation at the board of fire commissioners the other night, but I think it's education. And we did some of that this last year, and we've been doing it for a while as an organization, but that's a great question. And I think it's going to affect us more in the future here in our Gig Harbor community. And our Gig Harbor community is wildland interface community. We have rural areas that aren't urban development that we are going to have this problem in. So first of all, foremost is education. Education before the fire event happens, and be partnership with our communities. We just recently have been talking with some community groups, getting out with them and providing them with some education and guidance in our community. Some of the homeowners association, our Pepsi disaster preparedness group that here on the peninsula, we have some talks with them on the books already this spring to talk about wildfire preparedness. So education is that piece that ties in with preparedness, taking that education and now putting the boots on the ground and doing something about it. So you hear about the Firewise community. We hear about being involved with how do we reduce the risk? How do we reduce the risk of the ignition zone? And so looking for ways to partner with our communities to how do we talk about that preparedness? And preparedness can be everything from reducing the fuels around your house, can be also reducing the risk around your neighborhood. And then also too, that preparedness is one thing that I don't think we're very exposed to. And it's one of the things that you'll see me continue to, this message is evacuations, when to evacuate, how to evacuate. We don't do that very often here in Gig Harbor. We do it on the west side, we do it in California, the east side, but we need to educate our public, develop that strong partnership with our Department of Emergency Management and our internal PIOs, and continue that message into our community concerning about evacuations. So the nice thing about that preparedness for the wildland side of the house, if you will, and the WUI side of the house, is it also helps us in other things that are going to occur, whether it's earthquakes, whether it's floods, or we have some active shooter. But some of these things, these other disasters, it helps us with these things. The third part of that program is our response. And that looks at us, and that looks at our law enforcement partners, that looks at our utility partners. How are we going to respond when these disasters we're warned about them, and also too when we are in the moment of when they happen. This last year, I spent some time down in Oregon at the Beachy Creek fire outside of Detroit in Gates, Oregon, and the devastation down there was just unbelievable. But one of the things that was keen aware for me was the job that law enforcement and local leaders did before the fire happened. And that is key. Before the fire happened, they were in their communities warning people to get out, to do the evacuation routes and the closures, and communicating that effectively. And that was huge. And I saw that firsthand. And I took a lot of that stuff that I learned down there from those folks in Oregon and have it in the back of my mind. So when we start these things and we continue these things, their programs down there saved lives before the event happened. And that preparation doesn't start 2 days before the fire. It starts years or months farther back with the community partners and our stakeholders and our leadership and our elected officials. That starts back there. So those are some of those partnerships that I talk about in that response. So the last thing, the fourth thing, and thank you for this question, is the recovery. The recovery. When we have these devastating wildland fires, a recovery is a big piece of this. And one of the things is we need to be prepared that our community is going to be devastated. Our community is going to, not only we're going to be infrastructure, but also our population is going to be greatly affected. So how do we partner with some of these different government agencies or non-government agencies, and whether it's FEMA, whether it's American Red Cross, developing all those different things in the recovery piece of it. And the recovery piece, sometimes it's not the glamorous thing, it's the hardest thing. And sometimes it's the longest affecting thing, months, years. And as your next fire chief, this is something that I have experience in and have brought some of this stuff back to our community and back to our members. And this is, thank you for the question.
Certainly. We're at question 13 now from our commissioners. How do you empower management staff to make decisions and to be accountable for those decisions?
Well, one of the things for me, and everybody's heard it that has worked for me in the past, and currently works with me now, is the overarching provide leaders intent. I believe that you provide the overall leadership intent because that helps set the roadmap, that helps set the objectives about where you're going. And then it empowers our, so with that leader's intent and with providing those objectives, before you take on that project or that thing, you have to train them. You have to give them help them with the education, help them with the succession planning, help them with the mentorship. All that stuff happens beforehand. And so when you provide that leader's intent and help provide those objectives, and that's part of the empowerment process. And then you get out, lack of better words, you get out of your way. You don't leave, but you help guide them along. And I think that for me is looking at the fire chief is that that is something that has worked well for me. But yes, you're right. There is an accountability piece in that. So you have to come back and review the objectives. You have to, are you still on the roadmap? And one of the things too is identifying people's different roles and responsibilities. Different people have different roles, and sometimes we need to be keeping people in their lanes, even me, but keeping people in their lanes, and people keeping people in their roles, and people have different responsibilities. So one of the things about that mentorship and that guidance and that education is explaining the roles ahead of time, explaining where different people fit into the different organization. It's not that they have less value, it's that they may have less different responsibility, if you will. And one of the things, yes, you're right, accountability is a piece of that. And one of the things is if we set things up right, one of the things for me as a key is timelines and project management. And that's one of the things for me that I would like us as an organization is to develop project management. And one of the things when project management develops timelines and accountability in that. But I think as moving forward as an organization, we have 125 employees. And one of the things that I want to do is take the next step as far as project management and what do we need to do to reaffirm some of these timelines. And that's a thing that I look at as a needs development for our organization is some of these project management things. So I think when you talk about accountability, that project management comes into it as one tool to help with that. And then also an overarching thing is communication. Come back and revisiting that roadmap. Come back and revisiting those objectives. Are those objectives still appropriate for what we're doing? Do we need to adjust? But having that communication, giving that leader's intent, having that accountability piece to follow up and using the project management as a tool to do that. So thank you very much for the question.
Okay, question 14 from our labor group. What research have you done and/or actions have you taken to identify and reduce firefighter exposure to carcinogens?
Great question. So one of the things for me is how do we protect our people? It comes down to that. And I talked a little bit about this in the union forum that we had, I think last week or the week before. And so one of the things, how do we go about, how do we support? So for me, when you talk about research, it's a constant thing. It's a constant thing about developing the situation over the years. How do we for me as a firefighter lieutenant in the training division, also as a battalion chief, how do we reduce the risk? And so you'll hear me talk about that a lot. How do we aren't a risky business, but how do we reduce the risk? And one of the things that I think we can reduce the risk, and it goes all the way back to my involvement with the training campus back in 2004 and 2005, is how do we develop the engineer, if you will, some of the things to reduce the cancer causing things that we are going to experience here in the fire district and during our responses. So for me, a couple things, been a proponent, and even just up until this last station remodel, is putting washer and dryers and to clean bunker gear, and engineering some of that stuff to put that in every fire station does a couple things for us. It cleans our gear. Also, too, it helps us be reliable by not moving gear and apparatus all around the district. But I think it's important to continue those efforts concerning developing what can we engineer into our stations, what can we engineer into some of our processes. One of the things I've always been a proponent of is that having a second set of gear. We are very fortunate as a fire district, and it has been something that has been for Chief Burgess in his last administration, is to have that as being something as just a mindset that our folks are going to have a second set of gear. And I want to continue that. And looking at when you talk about and read and do your homework on some of that, getting our people out of that carcinogen stuff and getting that stuff clean is huge. And how do we support that? And it's just it's near and dear to my heart. And how do we do this? It's an all-out effort from all of us, from labor, from admin, and the commissioners, to help reduce this risk. Sitting on and listening to different cancer presentations over the years, and how do we do that? And always been a proponent of that, and will continue as the next fire chief to support that effort. So thank you for that.
Okay, and a final time check here in the process. We have about 28 and a half minutes left, including some closing remarks. So question.
Kelly, can I go back on that one a little bit?
Absolutely.
Okay. One of the things I forgot too is a piece of that is our health and wellness fitness initiative that we talked a little bit about earlier. But one of the things is our wellness and fitness screening, not only when you come into the fire service, but also too our annual ongoing wellness checks, our physicals, if you will, our treadmills, some of the testing that we do, getting in front of our doctor at least once a year, trying to, I think that's huge for us. Not every fire district does that. That's something that we have, I would just like to see continue and even develop farther concerning our physicals, so we can, if someone does have a problem, we can get it caught early. And we have had that in our organization. So how do we promote that? How do we continue to do that? And that's, for me, a continued effort to do that. So thank you, Kelly. Thanks for letting me interrupt.
Well, this is your time. So, okay, the next question comes from a community member. What measures, and we've touched on this a little bit, but you can expand. What measures should a fire department take in order to ensure an equitable, safe, and inclusive work environment for all of its members?
Can you repeat the question again?
Certainly. What measures should a fire department take in order to ensure an equitable, safe, and inclusive work environment for all of its members?
A couple of things. Thank you for the question. A couple of things that come to my mind. First of all is education. Education, our membership, and also education throughout our organization. Continued training on this effort, and creating a culture of this stuff. And it starts with me. It starts with our board of fire commissioners. And what it comes down to, I was reading something yesterday, and one of the things is, regardless of where you come from or what walk of life you come from, have respect for each other. Have respect for each other. So when I look at, there's some things what we can do as an organization as far as education, continuing programs, opportunities for people to grow in our organization. And so I think that education is a key component. And I think one of the things for me is the recent hire of our HR, like I've talked a little bit about earlier, is there's been some exciting conversations with our HR personnel of how we move forward. And one of the things I was talking with some of the other chiefs the other day, is hiring an HR person that can help dedicate to some of these things for us has made us a better organization and vaulted us forward in some of these things. And one of the things for me is that subject matter expert stuff concerning education, concerning some of these measures that we should implement moving forward. And then also to me is just, it starts, like I said, it starts with me. It's the respect of each other. And one of the things for me is that, Chief Alan Bruncini always talked about being nice. And I think that's something to strive for. Also, too, part of this piece is accountability to make sure that the things that I just talked about is happening throughout our organization, not only at my level, but the firefighter level, at the shop, and also at the commissioner level. So that accountability piece of continuing to, are we doing things right? And so those are some of the efforts that I look forward to doing here in the future, even as our next fire chief, also in the current position that I'm currently in as your assistant chief of operations. But I think this is very important, like I said earlier, to have a good workforce that feels fulfilled to work here, regardless of who you are, where you came from. I'm just glad you're here supporting our community and working for Gig Harbor Fire.
Okay, the next question is from our commissioners. Tell us about your involvement in the communities in which you have worked and how you have integrated the fire service into community relations. How accessible would you be to the everyday citizen?
Can you repeat that, sir?
Certainly. Tell us about your involvement in the communities in which you have worked and how you have integrated the fire service into community relations. How accessible would you be to the everyday citizen?
So for me, this has been a great opportunity. And I talked to my wife, we were just talking a little bit ago. I've been very blessed to find a career path that I've truly enjoyed. And I've just been so fortunate to raise my family and be involved in this Gig Harbor community. My involvement is actually, probably, lack of better words, my passion. And it can be, I can have, I'm always, throughout my whole career, I think that we have a great partnership with our organization. Our folks go out and do great work in the community. And one of the things that's so great about Gig Harbor Fire is we have great support of our community. And we talk about that at the board level and also throughout the organization. But we have great support from our community. And that is mainly because of the work that our workforce does, whether it's the support staff answering the phone, whether it's the giving somebody an address sign, or we're going out for the chest pain. So the involvement, it starts there. And I want to continue to foster that relationship concerning our community. And throughout my whole career, I've been doing that. Whether it's stopping and changing someone's tire, whether it's, finishing mowing someone's lawn. One time I actually went down to actually it was a day I went down to participate in legislature day to testify for a bill. And I actually was in my Class A, and I stopped on the side of the freeway in my Class A uniform to change somebody's tire down in Olympia. That is a normal day occurrence for me. That is not an exceptional day. That's a normal day. I even feel kind of weird talking about it because I don't like talking about it. But tell us, our involvement in this community for me has been huge, whether it's the Gig Festival, it goes back all the way to my childhood in the Harbor Holidays. Scarecrow Festival, me as a battalion chief would always like to see ourselves out in the community, whether it would be at Ides or the Templeton store or the Rosedale Market, whatever you want to call it, but sitting there and talking with people. and me having eating Swedish fish at the Rosedale Market, if you will. But it comes down to the main question: how accessible would you be? I think over my 26 career here, I have demonstrated that, and that would not continue. Actually, it would probably get more. And as your next fire chief, or our next fire chief, I think when you look at where my place should be in the strategic part of where we're going, it's probably going to be out in the community more. It's probably going to be out with Rotary or Kiwanis groups and doing these the Chamber of Commerce, which I have experience being involved in. So I would be greatly accessible, and I would say all the time, but I already am. And that is just part of my DNA. Ever since I've been here in this fire department, I have never missed a Santa run. And that would continue as your next fire chief. And there may be some things that I can and cannot do, but I think that is so valuable of being connected to this community, and being and having an awareness level of what's going on Fox Island, having an awareness level of what's going on in the Kopachuk area, having an awareness going on what's going on in Purdy. So being accessible, I think it's a daily occurrence. And for me, it's being present in the community. It's a full-time gig, and I have the energy and the passion for it. It goes back to that word, the passion for this community. And as our next fire chief, that would just continue even at a greater acceleration, if you will. So thank you for that question.
All right, Chief, the question 17 comes from a community member. What is your plan over the next 5 years to help the department grow and adapt to the needs of its citizens? What's your 5-year plan?
That's a great question. So a few things. I actually I think I look at 4 things. So the growth of our community. Our community is growing. That is fantastic. Gig Harbor Fire needs to grow right along with it. So I see a few things that we're going to be doing here in the next 5 years. We're going to open up more stations. If I could open up 2 more stations by the time I retire, that would be outstanding. The other thing that we have to do is we have to have a staffed ladder truck to meet the needs of our community and some of these buildings that are going in. But we have to develop these things. We also have to, first and foremost, before any of those 2 happen, we have to continue our involvement for 3-person engine companies. Then also too, some of the things, we have such a great training cadre, and some of the training, and people come to Gig Harbor Fire because of our training. And one of the things that we're going to need to develop and put effort to as part of our capital facilities plan is our training campus, and finishing that phase 2 of that training campus. Our people do great work. Our people we need to finish that training facility for our people. And it's not just for our people, it's for our community. And I see also that training facility continue to be what it is, and even develop more into a regional response as far as for law enforcement, for regional fire training things. But that training campus, we need to get it done. Our people are doing great work. We need to get it done. The other thing too, I think with our growth, we need to, as we grow with firefighters, we need to grow with our support staff. And I already talked about the human resource director or personnel and different things like that. So our support staff needs to grow along with that. Now, with all that, with our community, we have to potentially go out, and we will, not potentially, but we will have to go out for a 3rd funding measure. And that's something that once we develop our capital facility plan, probably starting now with the next fire chief, we need to start working about a third funding measure. And what is that going to be moving forward? We need our facilities. And like we know, our facilities are outdated. Some of them are not up to current code as far as seismic And another thing too, some of the engineering features, as far as the cancer stuff that we talked about earlier, we need to update our facilities to help with that cancer reducing engineering. And so, and I think with that, that provides that roadmap is that strategic plan. Bringing in labor, bringing in the Board of Fire Commissioners in the community, that great partnership, if you will, and get everybody on the same page as much as we can to develop that roadmap to do those things. The other thing is probably the last piece is not only do we have to staff 2 more stations, but we also have to look at the service to our more rural areas. That includes Fox Island, that includes some of Point Richmond. And some of those stations would be staffed, but we have to look at what we're doing with those rural areas, and we can't wait on that. And so we may need to look at different programs in the meantime before we can staff those stations. But if you were to look at me and I was to be here for the next 10 years, those are some of the things that I think is the roadmap that we need to all get on together and move forward with. And the funding measure, we have to look at that funding piece to support those things that we want to do. But that was a great question. And, you know, those things for me help meet those needs of the citizens and the growing need of our area of the Gig Harbor community.
Okay, and finally, the last structured question comes from our commissioners. Share with us your experience in building and maintaining the public confidence in the fire department.
Can you repeat that, please? Thank you.
Certainly. Share with us your experience in building and maintaining the public confidence in the fire department.
So one of the things for me is that when we have the confidence of the people, we need to be fiscally responsible for what what the Board of Fire Commissioners and the community has allowed us to do. So a component of that, just as important of being out on the street, is the fiscally side, responsibility side. We as a fire district have had great experience having good audits over the years and having those pieces in place. I think as we move forward, as we continue to grow, those things are going to need to be updated. So being fiscally responsible to our people is a piece of that, and that shows confidence in that what we're doing and how can we manage those things. Also, too, I think providing that goes back to that strategic plan and that roadmap. One of the things is just learning from others. And communicating out early, communicating the plan, developing the plan, getting partnership early from the board, from labor, and the community. So when we go out for an additional funding measure, we go out to do something, I don't want to say drastic, but something to that effect, we need to have our ducks in a row and have our roadmap done. Those things that I'm talking about is the capital facilities plan and getting that finished, and also our strategic plan. So we can communicate that strategic plan not only internally but also externally. So when as our next fire chief, that strategic plan for me is a roadmap, not only when you're talking to the Chamber of Commerce or local community groups, but it's also that internal document. So I think developing the plan and having that good project management, and then also communicating the process of the plan or the how are we doing with the plan, I think is key. And sometimes maybe we don't do that as often, but how do we communicate? Hey, where are we at? We're 20% done, we're 60% done, but how do you instill that confidence? So I think for me is, first of all of us, the board, the board, the community, and labor, and also the executive staff, all being on the same page. And then when we go out to the community and we instill that confidence that we're going to show up in a timely fashion when you have an emergency, we're going to keep care of your financial dollars, and we're going to provide you great customer service. And we're also going to be taking care of our people.
Okay, thank you, Chief. At this point, I'm going to open it up to the panel for any questions of their own, any follow-ups, anything you want to revisit. Any panelists? Seeing none, we'll switch the view. And Chief Meyer, do you have any questions for the interview panel?
I don't have any questions, sir, but do I? Is there a chance to give a closing comment?
Yes, we'll afford you 3 minutes. And if you have no questions, you can go ahead and begin that right now.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I am very fortunate to be sitting in this position, and I don't take that lightly. So for me, why do I want to be our next fire chief? I want to serve our community. I want to provide leadership that prioritizes operations. And I also want to support the development of our people. And when I look and how my vision and stuff moving forward, I kind of have it broken down into 4 things. The first one for me is the health of our people, the health of our organization. And a lot of things factor into that. Health of our people is taking care of them concerning the cancer, like we talked about, peer support, taking care of them as far as having the appropriate work week, taking care of them concerning some of their needs that we are experiencing in our current culture. And then also our health as far as our funding, our capital, and our relationships. One of the things that you will get from me is I will have that strong work ethic to be present not only in our community, but also in our fire stations. One of the things that also is important to me as far as my vision is performance. Key to that is training. Key to that is accountability, our response readiness and our reliability. And some of the things as far as our performance, like I already talked about adding more stations and ladder truck, but how do we improve that performance to the people in the community on the street? The third thing of my vision is the community. And we've already talked a lot about that. And that, like I said, that's probably my strong point, is the community and the involvement. We have to be involved in the community, be present in the community. I get so excited when our firefighters and our personnel want to be out in the public, whether it's the schools, whether it's out at trick or treat, whether they're out at the store talking with people and handing out badges. I just want to promote that and just continue to support that and provide that guidance of that, be out in our community and provide that support. The last thing for me, as far as my vision, is to provide leadership. And that's the development of our people. That's partnering with all the different portions of the board, labor in our community, and providing that leadership moving forward of how do we develop our people, developing our people, and also developing for that leadership for our growth and our change that we are in the middle of. And it's going to continue. That's been the great things about my career, was that we've always been growing. It's been a great place to work. So we need to develop that shared vision that with the board, the members, and also community. And one of the things for me to help with that roadmap is our strategic plan. You've heard me talk a little bit about that before. I'll leave you with this. The last thing that I have, and it resonates a little bit with me, and if I was to sum up something as far as an overview, if you will, about my passion concerning this, and I'm not going to memorize it, I'm just going to read it because I would screw it up if I tried to memorize it. But this is a quote from General James N. Mattis, and it really resonated with me when I was reading one of his books. And he talks about, his quote is, "My goal is to return clarity to our planning process and operational concepts. Ultimately, my aim is to ensure leaders convey their intent in clearly understood terms and empower their subordinates to act decisively. And that quote just really resonated with me and was really dear to me. And if you were to look at my leader's intent, that embodies what that is. So greatly appreciate the effort and the opportunity to be here today. I am proud to be a member of this fire department, and thank you very much for this time.
Okay, thank you, Chief Myers. At this point, I'll turn it back to Chair Wilsey for any formalities or action.
Thank you for your time there, Chief Meyer, today. Appreciate it from the board. And then also want to remind everybody we will be logging off of this link. Please access that link that you used to get in here again for the final interview, which should commence. We will start and open the webinar at 12:55 and hopefully get started with our final candidate. We will be in recess until that time. Thank you.